Welcome back to 9.4. We're going to be talking about circle graphs, or sometimes they're called pie graphs. A circle graph or a pie graph looks just exactly like what the name sounds. It looks like a circle and it's cut into pieces like a pie or a pizza. I think they ought to call it a pizza graph, but a pie graph is what it is. And within each one of the pieces, quite often they're nicely colored and so it makes a real visually appealing thing. But you need to remember that the numbers that are inside the graph do not represent how many people or how many things do that. They represent percents. So if I have a pie graph here of what different vehicles or how people get to work, within my categories, they take the bus, they drive a truck, they drive a car, or maybe they walk. So those are my categories. And each one of these numbers do not represent 15 people. They represent 15% of all the people that I surveyed did this particular thing. So you need to remember that the percents and the categories are in the graph, not amounts. Now, for each pie or circle graph, there was usually a table that helped them draw it, or sometimes they'll give this to you and ask you to come up with a table. And so here's an example of a table for this particular graph. My categories are the different pie pieces. I have a bus, a car, a walk, or a truck. Let's say that I surveyed 200 people in my survey, and so 30 people said they rode the bus, 60 did the car, 30 walked, and 80 did the truck, and so then I figured out my percentages. Now please notice that your percentages are going to always add up to 100, okay? And then the amount for each of these categories should add up to the total amount of people that you surveyed or that you're talking about in the survey. So these totals down here at the bottom are really important for you to be able to fill in the chart. So what they're going to ask you to do now is they're going to ask you to maybe read a graph and tell them how many people did a certain thing or what percent did something, or they might give you a table that's partially done, or a pie graph that only has part of it and you have to finish filling in the table. So let's talk about these two examples. You're going to use this basic formula to come up with a proportion in order to find these answers. There's other ways to do it, but this is really the very easiest. You're going to put the amount for that category over the total amount of things that are discussed, and that will equal the percent over 100, because percent always goes over 100. So let's say, for example, that I have these three salesmen and they're selling cars for me. And I have that Tom sold 50 cars in this particular year, Mary sold 25, and Joe only sold 5. Well, I want to know what percent each one of them sold so that I can pay them the proper commission that they earned. Well, the first thing that I need to know is how many total cars did they sold. Well, 50, 25, and 5 would come up to be 80, so 80 is my total amount. Now, in order to find the percents, I'm going to set up proportions. So for Tom, the amount that he sold is 50, so I'd have 50 over the total was 80, and that would equal my percent over 100. And so I would do my cross multiplying. 80p would be equal to 5,000. Divide by 80. And I would get that my percent is 62.5. So right here in your percent, you'd put 62.5%. And then I would do the same thing with Mary. Instead of having 50 here, I would have 25. And then I would do the same for Joe, but instead of having 50, I would have his amount, which was 5. Then when you do each one of these percents, you need to make sure that when you add them all up, that it comes out to be 100%. Okay? If one of them didn't come out to a pretty percent and you needed to round it off, make sure that your percents come out to equal 100 when you get finished. Okay? Well, let's go the other way. Let's say that I've got 50 students that I have figured out their grades, and so I've made myself a table. From 0 to 69, 10% of my students made that grade, which was failing. And then from 70 to 79, 80, and I give you the percents for each one of them. Now, if you add up my percents, 10, 60, 20, and 10, that should come up to be 100. Okay? And so I know that I've got 100% of my students, but I want to know how many students actually made that grade. So I'm going to use the same formula, but I don't know the amount of students that made an F. So I would have X over your total. Well, how many total students did I have? We have to look back at the question. It told you had 50 students. So I know that my total here is 50. So that would go X over 50 is equal to percent over 100, okay? When you cross multiply 100, the percent for the first one is 10. So I have 100x is equal to 500. Divide by 100, and you get that X is 50. No, it's 5, excuse me. So 5% would be the answer that goes right there. Oh no, excuse me, 5 people would be the answer that goes right there. So you're going to do the exact same proportion, but this time you have the percent, so it goes over 100. What you're looking for in terms of what each of the peoples are going to go over 50. So this part of the proportion is going to be staying the same all the time, and it's going to be the different percent over 100. When you did these, you were looking for the percent, so the P over 100 is going to stay the same, and this part of the proportion changes based on which category you're in. The important thing when you do these is to make sure that your percents total up to 100 and that your amounts total up to whatever the total amount of people or students or cars or whatever it is. Now, this one, you've got names, sometimes you have dates, sometimes you have months, sometimes you have numbers, sometimes you have groups of numbers that are called frequencies. So don't let the categories throw you off. All you're looking for is how to find this, how to use this ratio or this proportion to find the missing part. Call me if you have questions.